economic side, there are no signs of success. Very little. I found in politics you've got about 2 to 2.5 years after you've been elected to get something done and to move out in a positive direction on something as important as the economy. And here we are.
And so you think it has failed on the economic side?
Failed on the economic front.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. A live look as the sun comes up over Washington. Welcome back. 22 past the hour, and joining us now, Republican Senator from Wyoming, Senator John Barrasso. Senator, thank you very much for being with us on the set today.
Thanks for having me.
What do you think of Huntsman? We just heard from him. We've been talking about him all morning. Yeah. You have a gut feeling about him as a potential Republican contender?
I like him. I went to Iraq with him to visit with General Petraeus in 2007. And I think that he brings a lot to the table, as do a number of the other Republican candidates. I'm not here to either endorse or criticize any of our potential candidates, but I think he has a lot to offer.
Okay, we heard from he's speaking pretty clearly on foreign policy, which has been interesting for all of us to listen to some of his sound bites. The Obama administration certainly is starting an internal debate about a troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, so let's go there. Where do you think we should go, and is it time to bring the troops home in large numbers?
Yeah, you know, I've supported the president in his efforts all the way through. I've been to Afghanistan 4 times, most recently this year. We need to make sure that the Afghan people are ready and prepared to stand up for themselves.
Well, that will never happen. So if we contend that will never happen.
They're getting closer. They are, and I'm not going to quibble with the president about the number of troops that he brings home. They're talking different numbers. I'm going to let it to General Petraeus and Secretary Gates and the men and women in the field to make those recommendations to the president.
Well, Senator, what do you mean by the people being able to stand up for themselves? I mean, how would you characterize or define that? Because that could be an endless debate.
Well, I was at the Kabul Military Training Center earlier this year. I've been there a couple of years ago. I think they're doing a much better job of training and preparing these troops. I'm not going to be the one to make the decision as to when the actual time is to say, yes, they are ready. They're much better prepared now than they were 2 years ago, Mika.
Tom Brokaw?
When you go out to Casper, or Powell, Wyoming, or any of the Sheridan or any of the towns, go up and down Main Street, that's part of the country, of course, where they do respond to the call to service, and they paid a big price. There was no better film, in my judgment, than Taking Chance, which was a description of the young man who was taking back
from Du Bois, Wyoming.
To Du Bois, Wyoming. What are they saying to you these days about spending American lives in Afghanistan?
Yeah. And I would to 4 different Memorial Day events to visit with families. We named actually a street in Cody, Wyoming, where you're going to be a little later this year, to the first Wyoming man killed in Iraq. Great reverence for our veterans. We've done a World War II of it. We bring back the World War II veterans. People are concerned. They want to make sure that we continue to be free and safe. They are very supportive of the president in the killing of Osama bin Laden.
But rising doubts about our continuing mission in Afghanistan and Iraq?
They're going to let it up to the men and the women and the deciders in the field.
What else is on their minds in Wyoming these days?
The economy, the debt, jobs, the spending, the fact that we're borrowing $2 million a minute for our country. We're leaving our kids with a mountain of debt. We are, we're a big energy production state. We worry that the president's policies are throwing a heavy, wet blanket over our economy by making energy more expensive, by sending jobs overseas because of energy, difficulty getting permits to explore for energy, the rules coming out of the Environmental Protection Agency, which are going to make energy more expensive for small businesses that are trying to create jobs. People of Wyoming want it to be easier and cheaper for the private sector to create jobs, and we're seeing an administration with policies that are making it tougher and more expensive for the private sector to create jobs.
Isn't it also a question of balance, frankly? And we need more energy. There's no question about that. We'll continue to need energy. But there are environmental concerns, especially in Wyoming, in getting the natural gas out of the ground and the fracking method and what that does to the water. But isn't this also a time to be talking about energy conservation and wiser use and alternative forms of energy as opposed to what we get from carbon-based sources.
Yeah, you need it all. The demands of this world for energy over the next 40 years are going to continue to go up. China is using more and more of all forms of energy, as are we. So the cheapest energy is the energy that you don't use, as you talk about energy efficiencies. We need the renewables, the solar, the wind. You need it all. And China is putting huge amounts of money into renewable energy, but they will even say 40 years from now, only 12% of their energy is going to be renewable. Still 88% is going to be from carbon sources. And in Wyoming, in this country, Wyoming is the Saudi Arabia of coal. We need to make energy as clean as we can, as fast as we can, but do it in ways that don't raise the cost of energy for American families. And that's the problem with this administration's policy and the Environmental Protection Agency with their new rules that are just going to raise the cost of energy for businesses and for families. And that's going to hurt the economy even worse.
What are the chances that you're going to get a budget deal in the efforts that are underway now with Vice President Biden presiding?
You know, the Democrats haven't even proposed a budget in the last, 2 years now in Congress. So I want to see the president's budget. That's what we're working on, though, is tying you asked for specifics of a budget deal. I mean, there is leverage to work toward what the president wants, which is raising the debt ceiling. He wants he wants really a new credit card and a blank check, and I'm not ready to give it to him, nor are I believe, any of my Republican colleagues. So you need to tie it to spending cuts and really dealing with the entitlements. Even Bill Clinton said if you don't deal with Medicare, you haven't solved the problem.
So you like the Paul Ryan plan?
I voted for the Paul Ryan plan. Also visited with Alan Rivlin, who was the head of the CBO for Bill Clinton. She has an alternative to that, but it also includes premium supports like Paul Ryan's plan includes.
So which one do you like?
Well, I like coming to a solution on Medicare. I practiced medicine in Wyoming for 25 years. Medicare is a program that has been very successful for our seniors. We need to do it. We need to make sure it's there. People talk about the fact that they paid in, and they have. A couple retiring today will have paid in about $110,000, but they're going to use over $300,000 in services. So that can't continue.
But
if we want it long term, you got to have a solution that works. Because if people that deny that there is a problem, aren't really telling you the truth.
I think everybody agrees that there needs to be a solution. But here you are, a physician and a senator. Mm-hmm. So do you think that the Ryan plan can work long term? You voted for it. You looked at it.
Yes.
Is that the answer?
The answer is yes, it can work long term. I think that the president's plan of putting 15 people, bureaucrats in Washington, to have this top-down approach, which I believe is the president's rationing board, is something the American people are not going to want Washington telling them what kind of health care to get. I'd rather have decisions made by doctors and patients. I mean, Paul Krugman, who's been on this show, talks about the fact, he said, well, Canada has it. Can't we do that in the United States? The people of Canada don't like the fact that they have to wait for care, sometimes up to a year, for artificial joint replacements. I mean, I did orthopedic surgery. I've operated on people from Canada who've come to the United States for care that was going to be free for them in Canada. They just couldn't afford to wait.
It's very clear there are problems with, and that we have to make cuts. I would argue that the Medicare debate is absolutely legitimate. What about defense, though? You're on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. What about these wars? Can you just really say, I'll leave it to the people in the field to understand whether or not we should be spending as much as we are in Afghanistan and as much as we are at the Pentagon? Should that be on the table in a big way as well?
Defense cuts have to be on the table. I think Secretary of Defense Gates has specifically talked about that. I know Leon Panetta, who's going to be likely coming in, has talked about it. General Petraeus has talked about it. I think that's a reasonable area to look as well.
But big cuts? What about pulling back in Afghanistan? We'll go back to that.
The president's going to make the decision as to the number of troops, but there's going to be troop withdrawals this year.
Is it time for them to come home, though, overall with this war?
I think the Afghan people are getting more and more prepared to take over. I believe they're not there quite yet. They're getting there. They're much closer to it now than they were 2 years ago.
Senator, can you strike a budget deal without getting additional revenue in some form to deal with debt? Can you get there on spending cuts alone? Aren't you going to have to find in some fashion, additional revenue to get back in balance?
The best source of revenue is a vibrant, robust economy with people working and then paying their taxes. And with what this administration is doing, I think is hurtful to the economy. Even the Secretary of Commerce that was just nominated by the president He's the one that started the Natural Resources Defense Council. They filed over 1,000 lawsuits against energy companies trying to explore for American energy. He talked about the fact that the Waxman-Markey cap and trade, he said it's a good way to hide a tax. The job of the Secretary of Commerce is to make us more innovative at home, more competitive overseas, not somebody that's going to continue to throw a wet blanket over the economy.
But he also ran a reformed Southern California Edison. He took a huge utility and adapted it to the modern age, didn't he?
Well, he's pushed for more of solar, which is their big push. Right now, solar is the most expensive form of energy. It's not really the most available, affordable, reliable, and secure source of energy. That's coal, and we need to make coal as clean as we can, as fast as we can, and all sources of energy that way without raising costs for American families.
All right, Senator John Barrasso, thank you so much for being on the set with us today.
It's great to be here.
Come
Thanks,
back
Mika.
soon. Business Before the Bell with Tyler.